Quick question. What is a placement marriage? Is that an arranged marriage?
Yes, that is where both the man and the woman, you know, the groom, the bride, are called up and by the prophet's direction are placed and are married.
They don't have a choice. So they're chosen. So he picks one and two and say, Mary, Joe, and John, you're getting married. Or do they court and then can you just explain that a little bit?
But by the late 1980s, when my parents were married, it was all done by placement and by appointment. Customary, traditional dating, courtship, and the ways that marriages usually go about were done away in favor of placement, where it was all left up to the prophet and to the top leader.
Trigger warning, this podcast contains mature themes and discussions of cults, manipulation, and trauma. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to Cultimatum, the culture of cults and human trafficking, where we expose the dark side of control, manipulation, and the human stories behind them. I'm Anonymous Andrew, executive producer and investigator into cult dynamics and coercive control.
And I'm Melody, a cult survivor and advocate for awareness and healing.
This is Cultimatum. Greetings and welcome back to another episode of the Cultimatum Podcast, a culture of cults and human trafficking. And my name is Anonymous Andrew. And with me this evening is my co-host, Melody. Melody, who do we have on this episode?
Well, tonight we are being joined by Mark, a former member of the FLDS community led by Warren Jeffs. He is now sharing his experience online as part of his deconstruction process. Mark grew up trusting the leadership and the system around him, but over time he began to notice contradictions in what members were being told. He started feeling failed by the FLDS and began questioning what he had been taught. Today, he's here to share his experiences and speak out about what he witnessed within the group. Mark, welcome to Cultimatum.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yes, Mark, welcome. And this is going to be one interesting story. So, Mel, where should we start?
I would start from the beginning. I mean, were you born in, or how did you get involved in the group?
So I was born in the group. My parents had also been, and I was the first of the children that came from my mother. My dad having been in different relationships before, but never having got into the polygamy. He was in one relationship, had one kid from it. That one left him gone. Then went through it with another one. That one was done and gone. Then he'd married my mother. So I'm the first of them. 14 full siblings, 3 half siblings. They were in a placement marriage that lasted longer in the cult, incidentally. And so I was born in it, very steeped in it, with my parents and even grandparents having grown up in it too.
Quick question. What is a placement marriage? Is that an arranged marriage?
Yes, that is where both the man and the woman, the groom, the bride, are called up and by the prophet's direction are placed and are married.
They don't have a choice. So they're chosen. So he picks one and two and say, Mary, Joe, and John, you're getting married. Do they court and then can you just explain that a little bit?
But by the late 1980s, when my parents were married, it was all done by placement and by appointment. Customary, traditional dating, courtship, and the ways that marriages usually go about were done away in favor of placement, where it was all left up to the prophet and to the top leader.
So you had no choice in who you were marrying. It was assigned to you.
Yes, by that time,
Okay.
it was full placement.
Okay.
I do have one quick question about that. Could you say no? Like, if you didn't want to marry that person, could you say, I don't want that to marry that person, or I don't think that's a good fit for me, or was that not an option?
When placement was fully implemented, there was a little more say on saying no to an offered union. It was greatly discouraged because, for one, it shed a negative light on the prophet and his inspiration of making the matches. It brought a lot of negativity and kind of framed it badly when it was thought to be such a noble and foolproof system. All of a sudden, the prophet knows who belongs to who, and there isn't any more fighting over this bride when, previously a man thought a certain one belonged to him, but another man felt just as strongly that that woman belonged to him. So they felt like it was a noble, foolproof system, and it became discouraged and eventually taboo to say no to a union.
Okay. Okay, that's fair.
Okay. All right. So continue. So and then I think I heard you say something like 14 siblings.
Yes, 14 full siblings. My mother
Wow.
had 15.
That's a big family. Okay. But is that normal
That
for
was
the
very
Mormons?
normal in that
Okay.
society.
Okay.
I could give a little bit of a rundown on that too. They
Sure.
stopped accepting converts later in about the 1970s, and an earlier leader of theirs said, "We will raise up a people." That meant a ton of inbreeding within the group, and that
Uh-oh.
was how we would grow our tribe, by intermarrying and having as large families as we could.
So let me put that in plain English. You could marry your cousin. You could marry your, dare I say, sister, brother. I mean, did it ever go that far? Did you ever see
No,
that?
no, it didn't happen with full siblings, but because of the large intermarrying and that step siblings and half siblings, it often happened with step siblings or children. However, I never knew of an instance where it happened with any full siblings.
Okay. It I should know this because I have a son who has a stepmother and a son who has a step whatever. Step means one of the biological parents are involved, right? It's
Uh,
not adopted. It's
yes, it's generally stepchildren, and in that society, uh, a step parent or sibling could be one who, on probably the most positive side, their their spouse, more likely their father, had died, and their mother remarried. When she already had several children. But on the darker side, there was a husband or father who the cult excommunicated him, removed the wives and children from him, and assigned them to another man. So
interesting.
step and half siblings were really common there, largely because of the shuffling around that first was a real shock and seemed rare, but then turned into regular practice with the leaders as ways to punish dissenters and to reward men who were in his good favor.
My head is spinning already. It's so why it's just trying to keep up with the I'll use the word protocol or the rules just in the breeding itself. Is crazy. Okay, continue. I'll pick up wherever you'd like. Where I don't want to put words in your mouth, but uh, at what age did where there's any physical abuse, sexual abuse, or any kind of abuse in that you were in FLDS, right? Did you
Right.
see whether in your family or other families abuse? I'll just use the word abuse.
Well, abuse is a pretty broad topic, but as far as all the kinds that could exist somewhere like that, as they tightened up, things like the marriages, activities that were acceptable, not accepting converts anymore, I saw religious abuse come in first. But then, feeling like we're right, you just need to do it our way. We're closing out the world more and more, and thus becoming more and more, more and more insular, more and more, think of the word exclusive.
Isolated.
That's the first form. Yeah, isolated too. Of course, with the community that they began building and moving more and more people to, that was on the Utah-Arizona state line. And with that expression of isolated, maybe I'll lay that out. While most of them lived around the state of Utah, largely in the Salt Lake Valley, there were little outposts in Idaho. There was one in Canada. There was just a little bit of that. They began to consolidate and cram it into the border towns They called it Short Creek, but today known as Hilldale, Utah, and Colorado City, Arizona. As they crammed more and more of their following into those communities, it was the epitome of isolation. On the Arizona side, it's a 5-hour drive to the county seat, Kingman. It's closed off from most of the rest of the state by the Grand Canyon. We're really isolated and on our own. On the Utah side, it wasn't quite so isolated, but of course, we had a handy state line right there that if any matters were to boil, we could jump the state line. In fact, it was a kind of handy thing for both sides of the
Do you
matter.
think that was strategic?
Although the leaders won't really admit it, as I dig into the history of it, I think it was. I mean, one, to give them some isolation, and two, to have the handy state line right there because they knew there was still much legal action taking place. They were taking a real risk by coming out in the open, coming out of hiding in about the 1930s and practicing it more openly. They knew the state line would present a hurdle and a challenge for any legal pursuits.
Okay, you want to tell us a little bit about your childhood? Oh, you were born, your parents, and you were born into this cult, FLDS, and anything stand out that you remember that I say haunts you today? Oh, maybe 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, prepubescent. Anything you want to share? Or
Well,
not, maybe 12, 13, 14? I don't want to, again, put words in your mouth, or if it didn't happen and you had a happy 8, 9, 10-year-old life at that time, but something happened somewhere because you left. I'm trying to get to the beginning of where things started to hurt you. And I say that delicately.
Yeah, well, my early childhood, it seemed really good, really happy, nice community, family, all the things that really draw people together, and of course, which is I've since learned is a really it's a really bright part of being in a cult like that. You know, some of the positives are family, community, all these things in common. It feels like everybody's just right there, ready to help. You have such a good structure, it seems. Now, from my earliest childhood, it still felt like a church and seemed like a really good, really supportive community. And all my earliest memories are really good. I was born there in the Salt Lake Valley. The majority of the church was still there at the time. When I was about 2, 3 years old, my family moved to the border towns. They had now how families could just uproot and relocate like that. This deserves a little bit of explanation as to economics or even real estate. They had established a trust in the 1940s. They called it the United Effort Plan, or UEP Trust, which had different terms and conditions, and which would allow people to build their homes and to settle at a fraction of or virtually no cost. And that also enabled them to raise huge families. You know, a person might wonder, how can a head of family or even parents, largely with no college degree or ability to, bring a substantial income, raise such a huge family, have homes for them, adequately take care of them, and then we see all these fancy pickup trucks and vehicles and nice lifestyle that they seem to have. It was a pretty ingenious economic move on their part, and I believe it had a noble purpose in being set up, allowing families to start out and, not having the ordeal of rent and mortgage. So there's to how, well, and we'll get onto that. Well, that trust most of its land that was in that trust was in those border towns. It was a really booming, developing community through that, in which, construction and home building just took off. And so,
And just to clarify, this trust belonged to the group, right? Not to an individual.
yes,
It belonged to the
yes,
group as a whole.
yes, to the church, to the group, and the people running it, the trustees, and the men that were in charge of it, of course, were all staunch church members. So, as people were directed to move to those border towns, they were pretty well told to not worry what they would do for a home. Sell the one they had where they were moving from. If they were renting it, just end their lease, move there, and pretty much start totally new in that community. And that's very much what my family did. Um, my father and his brothers that were of age. There was one brother who felt like he couldn't move from the valley there, and he stayed back. But there's another story with him. But basically, they started a whole new life there, uprooted from the Salt Lake Valley, moved to the border towns.
So your parents and others, when they got to the valley, were they? It sounded to me like you said that the real estate belonged to the church. So they didn't own that land that they put the houses. It all belonged to the church.
That's right. That trust, and all the lands, all the buildings, all the property in it, really belonged to the church. And there were conditions in it, like that no land could be mortgaged. And later, in like the 1980s, a condition was added was that people living on it were tenants at will.
Right. So the house you were in, you were not. It wasn't a mortgaged house where you would pay it off and then own it. You were renting, or you were tending, as long as you were part of this religion, you could live there.
Yes, on the positive, there was no rent and no mortgage. The negative or flip side was we didn't own the home, that it was owned and controlled by the trust, which equated to the church.
I would be really on the fence about that one. So I can live here for free and not pay for anything, but I would have to endure the rent, the
Well,
cold.
and you could be kicked out at any moment, right? You don't own anything, and if they decide they don't want you there, you're gone, and you leave with nothing.
Well, they could, and there were a few instances where the leaders. There were instances in the 1970s or 80s where the leaders undertook that and gave eviction notice or evicted people there. They usually had some pretty good substance or merit as to what they did that violated it. When I was there in the group and those instances were brought up, I'll have to bring in another element. We had a scripture study, or as we called it, religious study, family class, whatever, where we would read different sermons and history from the church there. And so those were often read to us. That was how I had got it, from different sermons of them. They told us there that the people they evicted or gave eviction orders had transgressed either trust conditions or conditions in the church to the point they felt like they had grounds to evict them. After doing a few of those, it kind of backfired on them, both with threats or refusals to leave, and later with lawsuits against that trust. They kind of backed off the push to evict tenants like that, and when they saw it was going to turn a little too hairy, we just ostracized them from our own world.
Wow.
Oh, okay. So then they just and that was to avoid lawsuits, I assume.
Yes, because some pretty hard lashbacks came after evicting a few people that were on it, or other defectors in it who feared possible eviction. So
Okay.
there's to the trust and the seemingly ingenious way to build homes, but which also gave the cult a lot of leverage and power.
Oh, and to finish my sentence, I was saying, wow, it sounds pretty nice that way you can live rent free, and I would imagine some of these houses were probably not, what's the word? Poverty, right?
Elaborate.
They were probably nice houses, like they were, especially if they were newly built. So you went to this valley or this other section, I think you said, of Utah, and started a new community of the FLDS, right? So were those houses constructed for you, or were they, or the church bought real estate that was already developed?
How it really started, the first bits of land, was there were many settlers in like the 1920s and 30s who had settled and worked land that was on those border towns. I mean, my great-great-grandfather was one of them. He had a good parcel of land that he worked and got from the government. Several other men that were either his brothers or other close relatives worked adjacent pieces. Between all of them and the property they had, there was enough to start a community. they turned it all over to, and consecrated it. That's a
The
concept that's
church.
kind of known even from Mormonism. Had consecrated it to begin that work and that gathering. That land that they had worked, it was all consecrated and turned over to that trust. That was the first of it. It was land they had worked from the government, but then later other different lands that were purchased, farmlands or other lands to develop houses.
So, how did your life change personally when you moved from the valley to these border towns?
Yeah. Back to the move. So from the Salt Lake Valley, over to the border towns. I was too young for it really to impact me that much. And almost all of my growing up life, about all that I can remember, up until different upheavals that found me leaving that community, it, I was growing up and I was living in in the border towns. So it's kind of the small town vibe. Everyone knows everyone. It's not only everybody knows everybody. Everybody believes and does everything all the same. I mean, we're uniformly marked, so we're spotted from from half a mile away.
And I imagine that this community, whether it was being developed or had already been developed, and so you had I would imagine you had stores, general stores, gas stations. So a regular community, other than you didn't have a probably strip bar down the street. So other than that,
So, Mark, let's talk about how life was for you living in the border town, and is that where you stayed until you left?
That was where I lived as my home. Many different houses around it over the years. So early childhood, I recall very little of it. My early years were great, about as good as it can get. Now, that took a turn around the age of 6 or 7. They were a really hardworking people who often undertook too much in the way of work, to the point a lot of families and children felt really neglected, and some of them didn't even know who their real mother or father was because they were so taken up with work and business and left the raising of them to relatives, aunts, uncles, siblings. But my earlier years were all right before my mother got all busy and began to go into the workforce.
So, if your mother was in the workforce and she had 15 children, who was raising you and your
right?
siblings?
Who was your guardians? Who was and here comes the big question: were you homeschooled?
Up until 1999, 2000, we had attended we attended public school. Now in the Salt Lake Valley, they pulled out of public school and had their first private school, and that was where Warren Jeffs, in particular, really stepped up in power and in becoming more prominent there as the school principal, with all of his lessons being recorded. Those were saved and would be played. I mean, played and used generations down the line. So that's to schooling in that area. But in Short Creek, where I was, we attended public school up until then, when they then ordered us to pull all of our children out of the public schools and then to have private schools clear
And
across the board.
What age was that?
Well, third grade was the last year that I attended in public school. Well, I had my 9th birthday that year.
Ninth. Okay, I was
So
trying to do the math, but
things began to take a turn for the worse. One, with them undertaking so much in the workforce, a lot of growing children in these huge tribes are being quite neglected. So then we're just being farmed off to whoever's convenient, whoever works, not necessarily whoever is best for us. I was raised and tended and farmed off just incredible amounts as a kid. Now, I at least knew who my own parents were, but to see that when things turned that way, my parents, in wanting to both provide for the family, we have a good home, we have good vehicles, and we also try to meet the church cult's financial demands, they have to go and work a lot more. And then cult tactics start to come in, like pulling us out of public school, restricting the kind of media we can have, telling us to put a gap between ourselves and people in the outside world. It started in moderate degrees there, but then just turned more and more ridiculous. So the year 2000 came, and of course they had all their ideas about end of the world around the year 2000. And all these philosophies, all these ideas of what's going to happen in the world,
So
feeling
this
like,
was a doomsday cult.
oh yes, they were
Okay.
big on that. Year 2000 was a huge turning point in several things. We felt so sure the world was going to end around that time, and we had to be prepared for it, taking all these measures to. And the leaders had colorful ways of framing their actions and the things that they would make us do to make it look like it was something great, something noble, something that would bring us closer to God, something that would save us from imminent destruction, as they began to ask us to do crazier and crazier things. So year 2000 comes and goes without incident. But by now, Warren Jeffs, I'll refer to him as the younger Jeffs and his father, Rulon Jeffs, as the older one later on in the video. So as the younger Jeffs comes into power, his father had been crippled by a stroke not too long after the younger Jeffs, was put in the position of first counselor. And with his father not really able to make all the decisions and command everything, he had to kind of hide and shield his father's real condition as he continues as the second in command, giving all the orders. He was really crafty in keeping it from everybody just how gone his father really was. So he's really just giving the orders. And he's doing it having had a background, he had books about Hitler, the Third Reich, the Nazis. And as many of us look back on it, he ran his operation in quite a similar fashion, in trying to get people absolutely devoted, getting family members to turn on each other and rat each other out, to have a total devotion to him, even the, Hail Hitler type, although he had it in a different manner for us to show our absolute devotion to him.
And was he
So,
doing this all under the guise of saying that his father was giving all these directions? Was he claiming that these rules or regulations or the things that were changing were coming from his father?
yeah, that's the way he would frame it. Um, I think he knew he had to have his father present or have enough backing. So, because he's already stepping so far out of line, it's like, are the people gonna, wonder or catch me in this or that? That for one, to give us some kind of, for us to accept it, I guess you could say. Every time he would get up and speak, whether it was at a Monday morning meeting, Monday morning that we had. Maybe I'll just go through the meetings we had as a whole group. We all assembled in a building able to hold 4,000 people every Monday morning, every Saturday morning. Those meetings went for an hour, hour and a half each. Then every Sunday, our regular church meeting, and those ones went for at least 2 hours. We had all of those ones just as an entire religious group. And then as we got the private schools, there was morning devotional every morning and weekday there. Now, all of them where he spoke, he would always open them saying, "I'm here to do the will of my Father," making us feel like he's just this noble servant and follower who's just doing what his father wants. His father, who's too ill or for whatever reason isn't able to personally attend all the meetings. He generally attended the meetings on Sunday, giving us a sight of, here he is in front of us. So ultimately he framed his actions as being backed by, directed, and approved by his father.
So let's jump ahead to the point where you're starting to have doubts, and what created your doubts. Where did that start creeping in?
That was far down the line. I accepted everything they were doing. I mean, of course, I'm in these young years where I'm just so easy to direct any which way. The first time I think I developed any kind of independent streak and was just acting for myself, I had a period of it when I was about 11 years old. But between the resources they had there, somehow it was reined in and I was kind of pulled back into the mold of being submissive, obedient, and accepting. And any who know about those groups, especially any that are, have their roots back with Joseph Smith or Mormonism, at age 12 is the age when men receive the priesthood. They have the different offices of it. And that was another turning point with me that kind of just pulled me out of that wild mold and became this submissive, accepting, obedient, um, obedient follower. And of course, they have the different levels or opposites of it, which is common in the Mormonism. So when that was brought to me, it was just pounded into my head so hard, this responsibility I needed to take, how I needed to throw off childish things and, start to be a man. At age 12, I had to start throwing off my real humanity and start to accept the molding and the programming that they were giving me. And of course, it just continues on more and more intense until you're 18 and adult age, and there's such a weight and level of responsibility on you, you don't even dare, you don't dare or think about leaning away or getting out of it, even though you are aware you are of legal age too.
Right. By then, the indoctrination is taken hold.
I was fully implanted. Yeah. I'm gonna ask a question, and feel free to just say that it just didn't exist, or you don't want to answer it. But you mentioned 12, and then you mentioned 18. Those years in any young man's life, and I'll say not 100%, but the majority, it's the way our bodies are built. 12 years old is prepubescent or pre-adolescent, and that's when the hormones are flying around, and 13 and 14, and the same with the girls. And that's normal, because that's when we start dating and giggling and holding hands and kissing behind the high school grandstand or whatever. That's what I did. Were you tempted? Did you have any feelings? Did you see women or young women, teenage girls? Did any of this affect you? Or were you so deep into the indoctrination that you were just so scared that, God forbid, I even hold a girl's hand? I mean, can you talk a little bit about that?
We'll be right back after a quick break.
Don't go anywhere. More Cultimatum is coming up. If you want, if you don't want, that's quite okay too.
Well, in my own experience, I was definitely on the side that was trying to comply, be the good boy, do everything that was expected. I've seen those that rebelled and said, to hell with it, or, well, I'm just going to do what seems cool or what I feel like. The urge is so strong and it's so stupid that they tell us, from our youngest years, don't talk to the girls, don't look at the girls. As you get into this age, the only sexual education, which, this is one of the first things that just blows people's minds. About the only education we get on human anatomy, anything of a sexual nature, is we're told that as we approach our teenage years, that things begin to happen in our body that will be tempted toward, boys be tempted toward the girls, as in my case, girls be tempted toward the boys. And we're just pounded and overwhelmed with all this teaching as to how to fight it and how to cope with and how to deal with it. We were told that any feelings like that toward the opposite sex was terrible, was sinful, that we were right on the verge of adultery if we
push it down. They
down
told
that
you to
vein.
push it away. Yeah. Wow.
So it
Okay.
was fight those hormones, feelings, and emotions. Don't accept them or try to work with them.
Suppress it.
Okay. All right. So, literally, in the interest of time, we need to get to the point where you critically thought or thinked. What's the right word? Critically thunk. Where you said, this is not working for me. And what age was that? And walk us through that.
Well, to reach that, I'll have to skim through adulthood and my 20s, because I was in my high 20s toward 30 when I began saying, when I began thinking that this just isn't going right. It's so I'll give a briefer, quicker breakdown of it. 12 to 18, intensive programming. So that by the time we're 18, if we were functioning like the mainstream LDS church, we would be primed and ready to go on a mission like they do there. We were being primed and programmed and taught tenfold. So we're ready and moldable for whatever that call's going to be. Now, I probably should touch a little bit on what's happening with the young women at this same stage, even though I was just a young man there. They're being given enormous responsibility in their youngest years. By age 12, when those things start to hit with them, they're so busy with household chores and helping raise their families and siblings and helping their moms and whatever, they're often too busy to give that much thought. So there's those prime years. I'm going to have to skimp over my 20s, in which I was just the typical church member trying to comply, trying to be a good boy, trying to fit their ideal.
And still 20 to 25 or whatever, you still not looking at women?
Yes, and there's an important piece to bring in. When I
Okay.
was 16 going on 17, funny, that's exactly the words that are in that song in The Sound of Music. I was 16 going on 17. Their leader, Warren Jeffs, was arrested. I skipped over all his legal troubles and everything, but he was on the FBI's 10 Most Wanted by then and was arrested.
Okay.
We were so conditioned about the prophet's absolute authority over marriages, over anything administrative. All marriages in the group stopped at that point. And we were so thoroughly told and programmed that the only way to properly marry was to be called up by the prophet, placed by who he would place us with, and sealed by his authority. That all stopped when he went to prison. There were no more marriages in the group. Right when I'm
So
in the
about the age when you would have normally got married, it wasn't an option.
the men were
Oh.
usually a little older, but the young women were being married really young. So that was shut down. And we believed, his legal matters would soon be worked out. He'd be free again, and everyone who waited in faith would be called up and get all the blessings and everything. But at 16, all that hope of being called up and married was dashed. I just continued in faith, trying to be a good cult member, trying to support and help my family that was already there. Just, I had absolute faith in everything working out and eventually coming to. And the expression I'll use now, that there is a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow.
So, and what were you guys being told at that time? Did you believe he was in prison or know he was in prison, or what were you being told?
We knew he was. That was such a big happening when he was arrested that some leaders had to come out and tell us what was happening. So I went through my 20s believing if I just stuck with it, that someday everything would all be well. That's probably a short summary and version to give my 20s in interest of time. And I helped my parents. Well, even though my dad left the cult when I was 22 years old and then died when I was 24, that's another big piece of my 20s. Now, my mom is not only separated from him, she's a single mom trying to raise all these kids, and I'm the oldest of them. So there was a lot of family responsibility and kind of doing what I felt was right for those circumstances. For that reason, too, I didn't go into any romantic interests, dates, anything. I just put my focus all on them, on the
You were
home and on the
you
family.
were then the head of the male head of the household at that point because your dad was gone.
No,
So I want to back
actually.
up a little bit to Warren Jeffs' arrest. So he's arrested. Now, most people in the bigger society know what he was arrested for. Do you guys know what he was arrested for, or what is the version that you're being told?
Since we were allowed a lot more internet media and connections like that, and since his arrest was such a big event, both in the news and in the public, we knew a lot better of what was going on that brought out about his initial arrest. We knew there were many legal complaints, lawsuits going against him that eventually got him on the FBI's 10 Most Wanted. And after he was arrested, the plaintiffs legally had to be revealed. So we knew what kind of cases had gotten him there. We did know a little more about those. And of course, it goes several ways, but lower down leaders had to come out and give us their narrative and hope that it was strong enough so we wouldn't personally investigate it too far. So we knew we were basically given the narrative. He's just being persecuted for his beliefs as the Lord's prophet.
Of course, yeah, they had to water it down or gaslight you into thinking it was persecution more than guilt. That's
So,
something he
yeah,
truly did.
that arrest basically crimped my future and my hope of companionship, getting on into a family of my own, and ultimately further happenings later on in it. I mean, my dad, when he cracked under it and got out of the cult, and his death too, those are other big pieces of it later on in my 20s. But to get to the point you are asking, when did I finally say, Oh, well, for one, the family was more grown up by then. They could probably get along with me out of there by then. But when I really cracked under it, even after his arrest, even after his conviction, even after his transfer to Texas and the whole legal case that went there, and then his life sentence, and other measures that he did trying to keep us loyal and keep us faithful, even to the point of forbidding any internet connection. He forbid even that as his trial was coming up in Texas. He had to do anything to ensure we could not learn about the real details of his trial. It was there that he took really drastic measures so that we wouldn't know anything. But through all that, I just stayed through trying to hold together. But eventually, all church functions just were gone and shut down. By all indications, there just wasn't church anymore. And as I've laid out through my teens and my 20s, as long as it felt like there was a church there, I stuck with it. I tried to comply. I was trying to be the typical good boy and help with my family and the things that I knew I felt deep inside mattered and that I should support.
But when he was gone, and I mean gone, like I guess locked up at that point, or going through his trial, and you alluded that the church itself was crumbling, like it was just the foundation was dropped, the bottom was dropping out, and so was there no more FLDS? Did it crumble at that point? Did it go away? Or were there some stragglers who tried to hold on to it?
His trial in Texas, in which he got the life sentence, and the time that it really appeared that there wasn't any church were actually several years apart. So in the timeline, 2011, his trial there in Texas happened, and he got his life sentence. And of course, many people thought, with him put away for life, surely they'll at least go their own way, and the church isn't going to. But the church held together really strongly after that,
Of
even more
course.
strongly. He
Of
he had
course.
he had different leaders who acted under him, like the second in command, who presided over immediate day-to-day matters, who were free, who continued to just pound, supposed revelations he gave from the prison, all kinds of scare and fear tactics, and so many things to get us to tell him we were all in and to keep us devoted for years, even after that, which drove our loyalty even stronger in many cases. Because, we would use scriptures like there's the one in Matthew, I think it says where Jesus said, "Those who live godly in Christ Jesus shall suffer persecution." With that scripture, that hardened our loyalty, you know, beyond adding the second or third ingredients to epoxy by comparison, because he just used all these tactics to make us believe he's just being unjustly persecuted, it's all wrong, and that we needed to hold together stronger and more loyal. And we did that for
So
several years.
I was going to say, for you, how many years was it then from the time that he was arrested until you had that moment? What was the moment where your beliefs started to break down, and why?
Well, I continued loyal, trying to be in their good favor well after the arrest and conviction. So into 2012, 2013, 2014, through which years families are absolutely being families are being um, more figuratively murdered and torn apart. Parents are being cast off, sent away. Families are just being absolutely ripped apart through 13, 14, 15 into 2016. A really big hit came when several of his under leaders were arrested in 2016. There was the allegations over the food stamp fraud. And from there, it was really tough to get any direction. On a random whim at different times, he would designate certain men who could give directions or messages from the prison or who could take donations from us. That's another element. The financial demands that they made on us were absolutely insane. I had times I was owing the equivalent of 3 paychecks in what I had advanced in trying to meet their to meet their call. And that's a thing that really hit me during my 20, 24, 25, 26 years.
So, Mark, it sounds to me that through all of this, so Warren's arrest and trial, and then conviction, and then the new leaders coming in and trying to keep everything together, and you just said like your 3 paychecks. When did you leave? It sounds like you hung in there. As
I endured an awful lot. I could be hours, if not days, talking about my upper teens and 20s, sticking through it, still supporting them, still maintaining my loyalty. the point at which I cracked, which I'm sure you want to reach here, just have to skim over some of my 20s. It was when there just wasn't any more church. Nobody came right out and said there just isn't any more church, go on your own. Nobody came out and said it, really. But
They're
with
not
all
going to.
churches, with church functions shut down, nobody we can talk to, everything, storehouse, church, everything related to them. We cannot reach anyone for direction. It was when all that was shut down and gone, I thought, well, it looks like that time's here when they said we'll have to stand on our own 2 feet. And
Okay.
so
So,
ultimately, I did.
and what age was that?
I was 30 years old when I really took a stand and I said, I'm not going along with this anymore. I'm often so depressed. I mean, I was so depressed at times, I just wanted to end it all. To see the thing I put my whole life into, I describe it in some of my videos, but to see the thing that I had by that point put 30 years into, that I was
Such
told
your
was
whole
God's
life.
true work, that I told would even outlast the world itself, to see that they've put such a strong faith and such a strong belief in it. Like, this is the real McCoy. This is the real thing. This will outlast everything. To see it fade and crumble, though, I mean, I'm just in a, what the, you leaders were so sure this would last through everything. What the hell?
So how
it was at that
difficult was
point.
it? How difficult was it for you to actually leave and walk away? Was that a difficult process or an easy process for you at this point? Being that you're 30, do you have your own car? Can you just get in your car and leave?
I had my own vehicle. Due to the financial demands and how much almost every member got into debt to meet their financial demands, it was extremely difficult to break away from the main group of your family. It was tough enough for them when they refused to comply with the trust's new administration and to sign lease agreements to stay there. That was why most of them left Hilldale and Colorado City. I skipped over 2005 when Warren Jeffs didn't show up to defend it, when it was put into the custody and care of the state, and a whole new set of problems began. He told us, do not sign any papers for them, do not agree with them, do not comply. They are pirates that stole our land. So in our refusal to comply with them, eventually we were evicted. Any who stood by his ultimatums.
All right. So at 30 years old, I'm guessing that was your final, I don't know what day, but that year you walked, drove, flew away, however you escaped or left. I got to be careful with that word. Did you see others go as well? And um, is the FLDS alive today? Is it up and running?
Well, recently, in the last few years, there have been little light signs of functionality. Even though I'm out of it now, and only people inside who go against their counsel, or in their words, betray it, will talk to outsiders like me. What I've been able to ascertain is there are small forms of function and things going on there.
Little pockets here and there that are trying
Small
to hold
forms.
on.
But
Yeah.
because of the totalitarian rule and the absolute authority that their leader, Jeffs, has, if anything is to happen, the direction has to come from him.
So he's still running it from in jail, right?
He is. He has not put anyone in his place. He has not passed on that mantle, that authority, that ability of profit onto anyone. Else, if he was, for one, marriages would pick up fast and furious. Two, more lands of refuge, whatever, would probably be getting purchased. If it really was, so many things would take off like a fighter jet.
Yeah.
So because
how
of the,
long have you been out at this point? How long have you been out of it, Mark?
I've been about 6 years. So
Okay.
when I finally, when I got out of it, one, I waited until the family was stable enough that I thought it wouldn't be too hard for them to, to have me gone. I waited that long because I felt so much like they needed my help. Single mom
Did,
with all these kids.
did she stay or did she not
Oh,
see the
she
light?
stayed through it.
Okay.
She stayed through it. So there's so much history to give, and to try and cap it off with our last little bit here.
It is hard to condense it into an hour. We're aware.
I've
Especially
skipped
a whole
most of my
life.
20s. I've skipped
Yeah.
most of my 20s, and as I try to say what's going on in my 30s, there's a critical point back in my 20s that gives foundation to it.
Okay, we gotta really think about wrapping up, but there's some more things we'd like to know. You left there, and then you joined another organization. We'll just leave it at that for now. I'd like to ask where your faith is today in your so you left FLDS and whatever doctrine about God and the Bible and all that that you were taught for 30 years, you are now somewhere else in your religion. Where are you? Where is your faith?
Oh,
Who
I I
do you believe in?
oh, I hold to most all the things that they gave there. I've been through enough to recognize that there was lots of good in that group. And even today, I hold this sentiment. Um, that group, I believe it was a good thing that went into the wrong hands and derailed. There's so much good in it, and I still hold with most of the beliefs in it. And they are very similar to other offshoots from, other LDS offshoots and even the mainstream LDS church itself. But I told you how very depressed I was. When I was fully convinced this thing I had put my total faith in just appears to be dissolved and gone, I was mighty depressed. But where can I get help or respite from that? In that group, there was nobody there I could go to. They weren't going to listen to someone who was depressed. They would tell me I lost the Spirit of God. They would tell me I need to pray those feelings away. They would tell me I just need to get over it, that I need to pray harder. So there's no avenue. There's no avenue for respite when you're just so lost and depressed. It's like, who can I talk to? Where can I turn when I'm just in the dumps like this? But it was that there's well, one was kind of the breakthrough. He happened to be in the mainstream LDS church. I'd talked with him, and I was just so surprised when I just laid it bare and opened up to him that I was received without judgment. It was such a breath of fresh air and such an answer to my depression and the way I was feeling. And then later, my work brought me, it later brought me away from where he was. But by and by, since they dot Utah everywhere and there was different activities and classes and things I could go to. For example, with the financial wreck I was in, it was really hard to leave the family home and to take the or else. I had some issues come up in living with the house there at them, and I decided to leave it on my own instead of being pushed up to the wall of, you have to do this, this, and this to continue to live here. Um, so when I kind of made that leap and began to search for, a rental, a place to live on my own, I was in bad financial trouble. But they had their self-reliance classes. I got into things like that you can kind of just participate in a casual way. They had activities for adults and singles, and it's like, hey, I can put that barrier down and actually talk to young women out here. And you know, it was at 30 I really felt like I was partaking of real life and learning some real world things.
Okay, stop. That's my next question. You're 30, you're out. You don't have to get that. I forget the word, but the arranged marriage. It was a place. I think it's a placement. Are you married today, or are you dating today?
No, I'm not married. To those questions, it's no.
Okay.
Actual navigating relationships and the roller coaster that was because I accepted the church's doctrine of don't talk to girls. They're a source of temptation. It's a hot potato. Don't touch it. Just wait for the prophet to call you up. Because of that, we didn't learn anything about real interactions of boys and girls. It was shut completely out in favor of just waiting for the prophet to call us up. So there is extremely poor social skills, certainly between boys and girls. Now, I worked in retail and I learned good social skills, at least in customers and how to talk to people. But it's a young, pretty girl. I freeze. It got really hard
Of course,
sometimes.
because you have absolutely no guidance or and that's what their teenage years are for, is to learn how to talk to girls. And it was nerve-wracking back then.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna I'll
So
go off on a
at
rant. You
30,
don't want that.
so basically, I was 30 when I first stepped out of that mold. I put aside that fear and actually tried to talk to young women that were about my age.
Good for you. Good for you.
And it was there too. it was very necessary for those LDS people I first connected to, for me to get past my depression, for me to learn self-sufficiency, and ultimately for me to even know how to talk to the opposite sex, not shaking so bad I don't know what to even, say and whatever,
All right. So I'm going to just say this. You're still young enough that I think you have an opportunity to pursue that if that's something you want to pursue. Melody, would you? I don't know how you're going to ask your question.
Um, I guess I'm just going to say if there's somebody out there that seems to be in a similar situation that might be probably sneaking listening to this podcast, what would be your words of advice to them on how to get out?
Yeah, if I could reach someone who's still in there, mind you, most people in there in that group, since no new babies were born after 2012, at least none that I know of. That's another chapter and element. Any who are still in there are at least 13 years old. But it's, you are in the prime of your life. You're in a time that you can take any course you want. So moldable. There's a world. There's just a world of opportunity and everything ahead of you. That cult, that group there, and what your family telling you is not the only world.
That's good
Okay.
advice because
Okay.
if that's all you know and all you've been exposed to, you don't realize there's a whole nother world out there.
And you, after you literally got out, you like you said, you went to retail and you learned how to be social, at least in the so you must
No.
have been exposed to things that you never even imagined existed, right? Because you were so sheltered?
No, a little correction there on the timing when I did. When I was in the cult, I worked in retail. I worked in their business that did customer service. Through
Oh,
that,
Okay.
I believe I gained some pretty good social skills. I like to read, I like to listen to things, and I got into a lot of things that gave me a pretty good social etiquette, so I was probably better off than many other young men who left it. Plus, I had a high school education. So
Mm,
I was better off in that respect. But even though it was a business where you help every customer that comes, regardless of religion, gender, age, whatever, it was a little tough sometimes. I need to give them good service, yet it's this pretty girl I can't hardly bear. It's just get so jittery to even look at and try to connect with. It
can
happens,
identify.
nervous.
stay away from
Yeah.
them, don't hold those feelings, whatever. But now they're my
Right.
customer and I need to help them.
Right. Yeah.
So thankfully, I had something like that to give me at least a social etiquette. But as far as the actual dating and actually learning those, those vital skills to really get along out in the world, that came to me. So much of that came to me at age 30 and after.
Right.
Okay. Mark, I'm twice your age, I'm gonna guess. It I still get the jitters when I see a girl that I wanna approach. I'm in a supermarket, and I see somebody pretty, and it's all of a sudden the anxiety that you got when you were 12 or 15 or 18 or whatever, it sometimes still exists, even as an
Yeah.
adult,
And
or in
yeah,
my
and
case, senior.
of course, my dating life. Yeah, that's another element these last 6 years and dating too.
Okay.
It's
It it
I've brought many out on dates. I've had really good conversations. So, you know,
okay. Hey,
so
that's a start. That's a start.
Yes.
That's a start. We have got to say goodbye. Melody and I are now going to do an outro, which means we basically discuss your story. So, but Mark, wow, thank you. That was just I don't know if we had such an in-depth view of the fundamental Latter-day Saints, Melody. I
No.
don't
No.
no
No, and we've never spoken to anybody from the Warren Jeffs group, so it's
no.
definitely a unique and different story
Wow.
for us, Mark. And we so appreciate you coming on and sharing your experiences with us and our audience.
So thank you, and I'm sorry that we didn't get a chance to go through some of the like you said, we didn't get through your 20s. So, um, hey, do you have a book in you? Write a book.
I've been working on that too, along with the
Good for
TikTok
you.
page that I have already. The TikTok, which I can do in settings like this. There's more room for error. I'm
Good
working
for
on a
you.
YouTube channel, pending the studio and equipment, and a book. It's all in due time. There's
All right.
so
So
much
your
more we
full
can give on it.
story
So
will come out. All right.
Yes.
Great.
yes,
Mark.
there is so much more can give on it.
All right. I'm sure there is. Mark, thank you for stopping by, and we really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, likewise. Well,
And once again, we want to thank Mark so much for coming on the show and sharing his very super unique experience with all of us. Wow. Wow, what a story. And if you want, we know that we kind of had to rush through at the end there, and Mark was trying to condense basically his lifetime into an hour, which is not easy to do.
No.
So he does have a TikTok account with lots of videos and stuff. So if you want more details and want to hear more about that, the link to his TikTok will be in the show notes.
That
So if you want to go check out more of his story, you'll find it there.
That's the problem with cult podcasts when you have cult ex-members that were born into the cults.
Yes.
And I don't think I'm explaining anything to the audience that they don't know, especially if you're ex-cult members. If you're left the cult at 30 or 40, and we have had people, that's 40-something years or 30, even 25 years is a lot to cover in 1 hour. And some people might say, well, why do you stop at an hour? And because an hour and a half podcast can be can go on and on and on, and it's a known, surveys have been done, and people tune out after an hour. And then there's the option of doing 2 parts, and we've also learned that 2 parts don't always work either. So
Right.
we try to sometimes, maybe we'll go over an hour and 15, and that's what we're probably going to do here.
Right.
Is go over a
And
little bit.
we certainly we do 2 parts, but we reserve that for very specific and very unique situations, because we know we have done 2 parts before, but it just usually we try to avoid the 2-part
But
option. But
I got a lesson today in the fundamental Latter-day Saints, and
yeah,
we have had them on before. You said we had a couple of guests on, but not from the Jeff Warren sect. You said, correct?
no, not from Warren Jeffs. No, nobody from Warren Jeffs.
Right?
Nope.
Jeff Warren.
Nope.
Warren
Nobody.
Jeff. Wow.
Well, he's got 2 first names, so it sounds like 2 first names, so
Right.
it's easy to mix him up.
And
So
it's amazing how, like, I think we found this in the Church of the Light of God, the one that's out of Mexico. When that leader went to jail,
yeah.
and that's a much bigger church cult.
La Luz de Mundo.
The Luz de Mundo, thank you. They still followed the leaders, even though
Yes, and
the
some of
leaders
them
were in
are
jail.
still, and just like this one, some of them are
So
still following it.
I will never fully understand that, and I would love to maybe one day really have either an expert on and dive deep into how. But I know
I'll give you my quick version,
the
Andrew.
simple answer is the indoctrination.
There's two answers. There's a lot of people that simply do not know the truth. Like
Okay.
we interviewed one La Luz de Mundo who did not know the truth and did not look into it. And then when she did, could not hardly believe it. And the other one is believing that that people are lying, they're being lied about, and it's persecution, it's religious persecution. Though they usually have to do one of those 2 things. Either they don't know anything about it, or they believe it's all lies. That's usually especially when a leader goes to prison for something serious like Warren Jeffs.
I think the government is
accusations.
persecuting them.
Yes.
I can understand where that is. I just think now that 20, 30, 40 years ago, today with the internet and everybody's got a cell phone. Okay, I'll say maybe just 15% of the population that doesn't. But if you could Google this, but I guess even if you went online and saw an article, you might think that it's propaganda. So the government is pushing this BS on me.
Or you just don't Google it because you're being told not to by the group.
Correct. Yep, that
Because
too.
you're scared. You're scared to actually type that into a search engine because you're like, oh, the church told me not to do this. And so if you're a loyal follower, you just aren't even looking it up to get the information. So those are the main reasons that I believe. That's my short version.
And I concur. I think that those are valid.
Yeah.
But again,
So
it's something that I don't know that I'll ever be able to wrap my head around. But
fully.
but there are people who don't know how how they can wrap their head around how somebody can become addicted to alcohol. So
Right, it's true. That's true,
it's
Andrew.
like
Yep,
I,
it's true.
I have
Yeah,
a glass of wine and I can put it down. Well, I can't, but you don't understand why, and I can't explain it to you. So,
right.
all right,
Exactly. So,
Mark.
once again, yes, thank you to Mark and thank you to all of you for listening. And we appreciate each and every one of you. As always, thank you for listening to Cultimatum. We truly appreciate your support as we work to expose the truth and highlight the voices of these survivors.
If you're enjoying the show, please take a moment to rate and review us on Apple and Spotify. It helps more people discover the podcast, creating a greater awareness. And don't forget to follow, share, and keep tuning in to our latest episodes.
You can also follow Cultimatum on Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, and YouTube for extra content and updates.
And be sure to join our Facebook community, Cultimatum Podcast, where we continue the conversations and keep you posted when new episodes drop.
And if you're a cult survivor looking for additional support and connection, we invite you to join the Facebook group Cult Escape and Healing.
You can also find more information about the show, including our full legal disclaimer, on our websites at cultimatumpodcast.com or anonymousandrewpodcaststudios.com.
And if you have a story related to cults or human trafficking that you'd like to share, you can reach us at cultimatumpodcast@gmail.com.
And if you'd like to support the show, you can do that by using the link in the show notes called Buy Us a Cup of Coffee. Your support helps cover production costs and allows us to keep bringing these important stories to light.
And as always, stay safe, stay informed, and remember, you are not alone.